Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 41 of the Day Zero podcast. I'm Spectre. With me is Z, and he's keeping me awake, helping me fight off the darkness.
Yeah, sounds like you've had a fun weekend.
Yeah, been a very long night. I don't think I've slept in like 28 hours now, so we're going on a streak. So before we jump into news, we do want to bring up that we are going to be going on a summer break. We want to announce it early. We don't just want to spring it on you guys. So our last episode is on the 25th of the month. Yep, that matches up. And then I believe we're going to be back on the 14th. I'm right on that, right? See, on the date?
Oh, well,
September?
Yeah, September 14th, I believe, is the date we agreed on.
Yeah. So we'll be away for a few months just because we're going to be doing some stuff. I'm going to be going up north for a little bit, and my connection up there is not going to be very good. I can promise you that.
Yeah, and people probably don't want to just hear me ramble on alone for a while. And I don't want to ramble on alone.
We could do a straw poll. I don't know.
No, but I mean, we did something similar last year. We took, I think, a longer break last year, though, but
not too much to do this year, so it's a bit of a shorter break this year. We'll get into that in a minute, I think. So part of the reason that I was up so late, or basically the only reason I haven't really been sleeping, is because we've been working on the OpenOrbis PS4 Toolchain. So I figured I'd do, a little plug, a little bit of, shameless self-promotion, I guess. It hasn't dropped yet, which is why I have a screenshot up on the screen. But the OpenOrbis toolchain is going to be dropping later on today. We've been working on it for over a year. There's been a lot of reversing work and programming and stuff, and there's been collaboration between lots of people to make it come together.
So, I mean, for anybody that's not familiar with it, what's the purpose here?
To build PS4 applications, games, homebrew, because basically to build PS4 applications in the past, you've had to use the Sony SDK, which is obviously, it's copyrighted material, it's leaked, you're not supposed to have it, it's technically illegal. So it's not really ideal. People have to get pirated links for the toolchain or for the official SDK. And then technically even anything they, produce with that SDK could technically be in legal gray water as well.
Yeah, on that note, do you know if anybody that's actually been prosecuted for using it?
No, actually. But
I mean, that's not a reason that's not a reason to go and use it. Oh, nobody's been prosecuted, therefore it's fine. You generally still want to stay out of using copyright material, because if Sony were to decide to, you don't want to give them a leg to stand on. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting. I almost feel like Sony is a little bit scared to do it now. I don't know if, because they got a lot of PR backlash back in the PS3 days when they tried to sue GeoHot. You know what I mean? That case kind of, I don't know, because they haven't really tried to pull anything like that since. But maybe that'll change. Who knows? So, but yeah, basically it's an open source tool chain. All the tools and headers and libraries and everything are completely like our code. There's no Sony SDK code or anything in there. We actually do kind of a cool trick, because obviously the PS4 has, its own libraries, and we can't redistribute those libraries, right? Because they're not ours. And we actually do kind of a cool trick there where we make fake libraries and do relinking after the fact to make it look like we're linking against real dynamic libraries, but we're not. So it's kind of cool how it works. We do some fun tricks like that to make it work. But yeah, people will be able to see how that all works a little bit later on tonight. We want to try to get something done in Mira before it drops. That's why Mira dropped way early this morning, and the tool chain is a little bit later. But yeah, we just want to try to get something done in Mira first. But the tool chain will be dropping tonight, so it might be interesting for some of you out there to check that out, and especially if you're interested in consoles and homebrew and stuff like that. Figure we do a little bit of shameless self-promotion at the beginning of the episode. I don't have too much more to add.
It's fair. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are here because they know if you threw your PS4 work, so you're not dropping a kernel exploit, but it's something.
Nothing's ever good enough. All right, so we can move on to Defcon. So memes are no longer dreams this year. Memes have crossed over into reality, as Dark Tangent has put it. Defcon has been canceled. I mean, we all knew this was going to happen. There was no chance that Defcon was going to happen this year. It was just too close. So I did want to ask Z, because there was something you linked to me during the week that I forgot to check out. You were saying something about a DEFCON Discord thing, and I wanted to ask what that.
Well, so that's actually about here on this page.
Okay.
They mentioned here, then on August 6th, we'll open the DEFCON discord.io/DC server up for everyone to join and start their con experience. So DEFCON in person is canceled. They are going to try and do like a more virtual conference. So which part of that is the Discord. And I do think the Discord's an interesting idea. I don't know how that's going to turn out, given the numbers that the DEFCON will see. That could end up being quite the large Discord server and not really get much discussion out of it just because there's too many people.
So are they using Discord because of that that like video chat kind of feature?
Oh, they don't mention that.
Okay.
So I have no idea if that's going to be related.
See, I was just wondering, because Discord seems like kind of an odd choice, especially for something like DEFCON. DEFCON's always been kind of had that theme of like don't trust anything, and Discord's one of those where I could see some people not wanting to use it just because there's been, you know, rumors forever about logging. I don't know how much I trust those rumors, but you know, there's been rumors about logging, and then you have the rich presence stuff, which some people aren't super happy with. I remember at one point, I don't know if it still does it, it would forcefully show if you were on mobile or not, at least on iOS.
Well, I believe it shows if you're only on mobile.
Yeah.
But, I mean, in terms of logging, I don't think Discord's ever really claimed that they don't log. I mean, they definitely don't push themselves as the privacy-centric option. So, yeah, it is a little bit strange for DEFCON. At the same time, you know, they're trying to reach kind of the masses. Like, I mean, DEFCON is not just like an hacker-only convention. I mean, most of the people who show up at DEFCON are more enthusiasts than anything else.
Yeah, I just would have expected like IRC or Telegram.
Well, Discord, so what I was going to say, though, is that both of those kind of have their rough edges in terms of being used in general.
Yeah, their usability is a little bit harsh, especially like IRC. Not many people use IRC anymore.
Yeah, so I mean, DEFCON is probably one of the best options they have. I mean, I understand the concerns about privacy and all of that. At the same time, given the type of person they're trying to appeal to, a lot of them are already going to be using Discord and aren't going to share those same reservations. That said, I can't imagine they're using it for the streaming, because I think there's still a pretty significant limit. Even if you're like maxed out and a Discord partner, I still think there's a limit on how many.
But it's like, yeah, it's like 30
still. They upped it. Well, for free, I think they upped it to like 50. But even so, I mean, 50 people, like DEFCON's not going to use that to stream.
Yeah,
like that's not enough people when we're talking
30,000 people.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, now there is one other last minute thing that I saw actually before we started streaming, because I had Twitter open in another tab. I remember a few episodes ago we were talking about how DEFCON quals were postponed because they weren't sure what was going on with the COVID situation, stuff like that.
Yeah,
and
Order of the Overflow has put out a bit of an update, but you can keep going.
Yeah, so I was going to say, Order of the Overflow has announced there will be a DEFCON CTF final, because that was one thing we were kind of speculating about, is if DEFCON's canceled, what's going to happen with the final of the CTF? And it seems they are going to be going through with it. They don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet. They're kind of, I think they're still trying to work out all the details, but they are going to try to make it work. So it's going to be virtual for sure, because there's no other way you could do it. But
yeah, well, I believe they mentioned exactly that it would be virtual.
Yeah. They said they're still trying to work out the details, and it could be cool to see, like, test the waters and see how well it works out. That being said, I don't think it's going to be virtual ever again, because this is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and I think generally people want the finals to be local. Although, I don't know, because some of the people I talked to that did the Defcon CTF last year were saying, or maybe it was the year before, but they were saying, like, they really hated with the Defcon finals how it's in, like, a public area, and they can't focus at all because there's so much noise. So,
well, I know at least in the past that has been more or less by design. Having that as part of the challenge. Yeah. That said, I thought last year they had kind of moved the CTF a little bit more out of the way from how it's normally been.
Yeah, that's why I was saying 2 years ago, because last year, you're right, I think they had it in Paris or whatever, and it was basically that was the only thing in that hotel, basically, was the CTF, and maybe a few other, like, really small, like, things. So yeah, last year it was quiet. The year before, though, I remember hearing from some people that they were like, can't focus at all on the CTF floor.
Yeah, and
it's neither here nor there.
I feel like
I don't think it's
some of the organizers, like, I feel like DD Tech mentioned something about that basically being, like, intentional, at least for theirs, and they were the organizers before Legit BS who did it, who were before Order of the Overflow.
So how many more years does Order of the Overflow have Defcon's, like, a contract with Defcon, do you know?
I don't recall how many years. I remember when they put out the call for organizers, and it had, I want to say it had 3 years on it.
Because this is their second year, right? Is it their second or third?
Third, I think.
So this might be their last year.
Or it might not. Like, I really don't remember. So
yeah, fair enough.
I don't want to come down and say, like, it's definitely. I mean, even if it was the end of their kind of contract, I imagine it could still be extended regardless.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a minimum rather than maximum.
Yeah. Overall, though, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. We'll keep an eye out for that. Who knows? Maybe we'll even do, like, a quick, like, update stream during our break, just to, if there's something interesting that happens or something.
Yeah, well, it is worth mentioning also, in terms of our break there. Yeah, we're going to be going off for, the few months. We still may stream during that period. We may or may not. Probably won't be the podcast, but just in general streams. And also
no scheduled streams, basically. Yeah.
Coming back onto the CTF, though, I guess maybe I'm mistaken. I don't see any update actually from Order of the Overflow. I could have sworn I had seen one, but I'm not
on their
seeing
Twitter page. Their Twitter page had an update put out today, I think.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw something earlier, though. Either way, it doesn't matter. I don't know where it is now, so it might as well just be gone.
All right, so we'll move on. So this year has been the year of the leaks. We've had AMD source code leaks. We've had CSGO source code leaks. We've had Microsoft leaks. And we've had Nintendo leaks. And some of the Nintendo leaks we've seen have been like debug ROMs and stuff like that. But the big thing is apparently the full source code and design specs were leaked for the Wii. And I will say, like, this stuff is pretty old. Like, the Wii is pretty old by now, but I think...
Well, so I believe really cool. There's stuff for the Wii. Also for... like the GameCube, I believe, the N64.
There's some 3DS stuff as well, I think.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously something notable stuff, like you said, source code for iOS, the Wii's operating system. And obviously all the data sheets, Verilog, for the actual console hardware.
Yeah. And that seems to be because apparently the company that did a lot of the development on the Wii, which was brought on, apparently their server got hacked. That's how all the files got leaked. Now, I don't want to say that we endorse leaks or anything like that, because legally that probably wouldn't be too smart. I will say, though, that it is kind of cool that you can take a look at the source code of an outdated console, especially one like the Wii, just because the Wii was way ahead of its time, man. It was a really cool console. And I think it'd be really neat to check out the source and design specs of that. So I wonder how, like, aggressively Nintendo is going after leaks, because Nintendo's
I believe
usually
they have
pretty
been trying to
heavy on
take
the legal
down
hammer.
some of these already.
Yeah, Nintendo's usually pretty heavy on the gas pedal when it comes to leaks and stuff like that. They don't tolerate it at all. At the same time, though, like there's a part of me though that wants to go out and try to find it, just because the Wii was just such a cool console, and I imagine you can find some really interesting stuff in there.
You can probably find some interesting stuff, but at the same time, you can't do a lot with it. It'll give you an understanding of the console, of course, but it's not like you can go and use this code to, work on emulator or whatever. Emulator kind of being the most obvious use case, I think, but as soon as you start using anything from this, it becomes a copyright issue.
Yeah, and well, not only that, I think it's got a similar issue to the AMD leaks. When you have like the Verilog and stuff like that, while technically speaking, you should be able to like emulate the hardware and stuff like that. I think like with the AMD case, you needed like tens of thousands of dollars worth of hardware, and then even then, it was like 100 times slower than the native hardware. So you probably can't do anything super useful with this stuff. But I just think it's like really cool to be able to look at, which makes it kind of suck that it's a leak, right? Because it's technically, it is piracy if you download it. So, gotta kind of fight that urge.
I'm not sure if it's piracy if you download it specifically. I think you still have to come down to using it. I don't think just downloading will actually be an issue. Granted, I'm not a lawyer.
Get a lawyer on this show, because we talk about a lot of this stuff, and it's like we can't come down on anything definitive because we're not lawyers. We need to get a lawyer regular on the podcast. If you know any, we'll hire them.
I'm not sure we want to pay those rates.
No, probably not. They're a little bit expensive. But yeah, so those leaks happened. I can only wonder what's next this year. We've seen so many things leak. Now, what is notable is I think these leaks are a little bit old. Like, I think these leaks were circulating around in private circles for a little while, which is also true of some of the other leaks we've seen this year. The CSGO one, for example, was like a 2018 source code leak. So
yeah, and this one, so I wasn't able to actually confirm this, but I did see some speculation of it actually being related to something that happened in 2017.
Okay.
Now, like I said, I couldn't actually confirm it, but there was at least a couple statements indicating that the person behind, the hack happened in 2017 or so, and that the person had already been arrested for it. And
I
was still leaking it, but that also seems a little bit weird to me, so I'm just tossing it out there. I'm not saying that's what happened at all.
I do kind of wonder what's prompting all of these leaks all of a sudden, especially considering like at least two of the major ones are like old. They didn't happen this year. So I wonder if there's just like a revolution happening. I don't know why there's so many leaks coming out, especially like generally like all of them have been within the last month. So it's been pretty weird, but I guess
I can't really speculate on motivations.
Yeah. So, Keybase and Zoom. We've talked a lot about Zoom on this podcast, not in a particularly positive context. And what we found out last week was Zoom acquired Keybase. So we wanted to bring this up not only because we've talked about Zoom, but also because Keybase, I'd say, it's safe to say it's fairly popular in this industry, just because of the service it provides. I used to use it. I don't use it anymore, mainly because the client is just not good.
Yeah, I mean, it was popular. It's definitely kind of been falling a bit.
Yeah.
Over the last, couple years or so. Nonetheless, I mean, it feels weird to me for Zoom to acquire them. On one hand, it's like, okay, Zoom has been getting hit by security issues recently. So this almost feels like it's just more of a publicity stunt than anything else.
I was thinking the same thing.
Because, I mean, while, Keybase doesn't really have, some secret sauce or some, special security technology. I mean, they use crypto. It's not something secret. It's not something that Zoom couldn't also do already. that they definitely need to, basically buy out Keybase to work on Zoom. Now, that said, they do mention, like, the Keybase team will be working on improving the security of Zoom, bringing on some of those things. Which, I mean, Keybase has spent some time trying to solve, but at the same time, I don't know, it does feel a little bit weird to me. It's not surprising that Keybase got bought, just because Keybase kind of, they had the VC funding, but they didn't really have
There's no way to really make any money. Like, they don't have any
profitability.
Model. Yeah. Now, related to what you were saying, I actually found like a pretty funny quote. I think it was in the other article that they link, but they said, "We are committed to remaining transparent and open as we build our end-to-end encryption offering. We plan to publish a detailed draft cryptographic design on Friday, May 22nd." So, I mean, I'm pretty sure we've went through Zoom's, and they're like piping up their end-to-end encryption before, even though it wasn't actually end-to-end encryption.
At least in this case, I'd say that Keybase understands what end-to-end encryption is. Whereas with Zoom, it seemed like, they were saying, okay, well, there's TLS, there's encryption to the server, there's encryption from the server, therefore end-to-end. Just somebody, marketing or otherwise, just didn't understand what end-to-end encryption actually was. I don't think that's going to be the case with Keybase.
Yeah, but what's interesting about it is, like, we just got the, like, crypto, design, or the... You remember that post they did where they tried to give, like, an overview of how the crypto works in Zoom, and it was just, like, really vague and not really easy to follow?
No, I don't. So what I remember is when we were talking about Zoom, I had brought up what was on their homepage. And that was also brought up by one of the people talking about the issues, one of the write-ups we did, where they had showed the comments of their homepage where they talk about, okay, we have like AES, 256, and they were using 128 or whatever, and like some of the claims that they made, but I don't believe Zoom's ever published any sort of white paper on their crypto.
Okay, I don't think they did a white paper. I think they did a short blog post saying, here, we'd like to clear up some confusion about our system, just because of the negative PR they were getting. But anyway, I find it interesting that they are doing like that design draft, and that's coming out on May 22nd, so we'll be able to talk about that on this podcast as a follow-up. At least we should be able to, right? That's we'll be able to cover that on the 25th. Yeah, I mean, so we'll keep an eye out for it.
There is this page of their support from Zoom where they talk about their encryption. Is this maybe
I might have
what
been
you're
thinking about
thinking
something
of?
else. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look, and
because like Zoom definitely has had some confusion over their crypto, but I don't remember them actually trying to defend like the proper end-to-end. I just remember that as being more of a marketing word that they used.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and try to find what I was talking about, because it was a few episodes back. Like, it was probably like at least 3 or 4 episodes back. So I'll try to go back and look for it and bring it up, and maybe do like a little addendum next episode.
Or add a link in the description.
Yeah, I could do that as well. Overall, I mean, do you think this move is positive in any way for either Zoom or Keybase, or do you?
Well, sure. I mean, if Zoom's security increases because of it, that is a net positive. For Keybase, unfortunately, I think this means what's going to happen is that Keybase, I don't think they're going to shut down Keybase. It's just there's not going to be any further development or minimal further development on it. That's purely speculation on my part. Like, I doubt Zoom isn't going to want to cannibalize their own platform and get people using Keybase. They're going to want to integrate Keybase with Zoom.
And there's no real way to monetize Keybase either at this point. Like, there's just
so I could see them leaving it kind of as is and starting to integrate more things into Zoom, which I think will be a net positive for them. Like, I don't have too many questions about whether or not the Keybase team is capable of writing some proper crypto code.
Yeah. I guess part of what my thought process is I wonder if we're going to start seeing more and more people stop using Keybase just because it's affiliated with Zoom at all. You know what I mean? There's been so much.
Well, you're going to have people who don't like the Chinese association, plain and simple.
Yeah.
I mean, in addition to other things, but I mean, that's going to be a big driver too for people. Actually, on Y Combinator's Hacker News, the day that this news broke, higher voted than the news of Zoom acquiring Keybase was Keybase alternative suggestions or something like that.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, Keybase was already kind of on its way out, but I think, being affiliated with Zoom is probably going to push it out even faster. I think people, especially because a lot of people who use Keybase are using it because they want that privacy and security aspect, you know what I mean? And when you start affiliating with a company like Zoom, even if you ignore the Chinese, weird ties going on there, you also have all the PR they've gotten for the stupid crypto issues that they've had, which, like you said, the Keybase team is more competent, but just that affiliation, it's kind of like that. It kind of like infects the brand, I guess, and people just don't want to affiliate with it anymore.
Yeah, I can see that happening personally. I mean, like I said, I think it's going to be a positive for Zoom. And it very well may drive more of Zoom's client base into Keybase, or at least into using some of the more crypto-based features. Like if they start making that more standard.
I will be honest, like playing devil's advocate, it would be really cool if a better Keybase client came along, because I like Keybase in practice, or like in theory, and like what it does, but the client is just so terrible. I can't use the client. So
yeah, and I don't think that's going to happen
on that.
Personally,
I mean, probably not, but it's possible. So we can keep an optimistic outlook. That's my thought process. Keep it positive. Anyway, did you have something else to add there? Because I know
no, not really.
Okay, so we'll get back into even more leaks. So everyone listening to the podcast has probably heard about this. It was the Microsoft GitHub account getting hacked. Allegedly, over 500 gigs of data from private GitHub repos were, leaked from the GitHub account. Now,
from Microsoft's GitHub account,
from their organization account. So the private repos were compromised. Now, from what I know, it is worth noting that I don't think there's anything in their private repos that's really earth-shattering. It's not like they have Windows kernel source code just sitting in a private repo on GitHub. From what I know, a lot of the stuff that was private on there is just stuff that there was one or two people working on, or it was stuff that was meant to go public at some point anyway.
Yeah, well, that's what it seems like the official statement's been, is that the stuff on the GitHub is generally stuff that was going to be going public if it wasn't already public.
Yeah, which still sucks for Microsoft. You know what I mean? You want to have that release. You know what I mean? Like thinking about going back to the toolchain, it would suck if somebody leaked the toolchain before I wanted to release it. But it's not as serious as it could have been, basically.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, even if somebody were to let's say there was some good project in there that, for whatever reason was on their GitHub just private. Even if somebody released that, I don't think it would really kind of steal the steam from Microsoft. Because nobody's going to use it until Microsoft releases it. It just won't be considered production ready. And Microsoft's generally you want something production ready and a leak just isn't that. The only thing I'd really be concerned about is, perhaps if there had been any sort of API keys either actually presently committed or in the history of the commits, something like that.
That's actually a good shout. I haven't heard anybody mention
it's mentioned here on this article too.
Oh, is it? Okay. Maybe my eyes don't work very well because I hadn't seen that argument. But yeah, that's a fair point as well.
But yeah, I think that would be one of the bigger concerns here, and you shouldn't be storing that type of information in a repo anyhow. So, I mean, are people going to violate that? Of course. I mean, it happens all the time. Oh no, this isn't. It's one thing you can say, like, okay, Microsoft was hacked here, but at the same time, it's like this isn't going to be all that impactful. Maybe I'll be eating my words, but I don't see much here.
My thoughts on this are basically almost exactly like perfectly aligned with the Valve CS:GO leak story. It's more of just an embarrassment for Microsoft than anything else. I don't think in reality there's anything like super juicy that's going to come out of this. I think it's just.
I'm not too eager to even hold Microsoft all that responsible on it. It sounds like this came because one of the an employee was compromised.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying personally that I believe Microsoft should be, like penalized or anything like that, but it is going to damage their reputation a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, use that line. Leaks are just a fact of life, as we talked about some episodes ago. I don't remember what breach that was, but at the same time,
there's been so many.
I just feel like, in this case, like, I don't even hold this against Microsoft whatsoever. At least as I understand it, being an employee was compromised. Presumably, as long as the employee still had 2FA, they were still compromised. What could Microsoft have done more? They already didn't get all the private repos. It's not everybody's private repo that's in here. Some Microsoft employees did comment that they had private repos on the GitHub that were not part of the leak. So it seems related to whatever that person had access to. I mean,
yeah.
There isn't a... If it was the employee being compromised, like, obviously, it might have been some failure on Microsoft's part. At this point, we just don't know that. And
it's not
I'm
fair
not...
to make assumptions, no.
Like, I'm not going to be holding against Microsoft. Other people still might. I mean, people who don't understand how anything works, of course.
Throwing shade.
Well, I just mean in general, like, you can trace that, or you can go ahead and call this Microsoft got hacked. It is technically true. As long as you take that general definition of hacking, it's just any unauthorized access. That's exactly what happened. Now, if somebody doesn't understand how that happens, they got hacked, and any hack is all the same. Similar to somebody hacking the NSA because they, defaced the page or something. Which I don't think has happened in quite a while, but, something like that, like, if you understand, then it's not as much of an issue. Now, like I said, I don't know the details, so I can't actually say that, Microsoft wasn't at fault here, like, they did everything right. Like, it could have very well been Microsoft. They could have not been forcing 2FA. It could have been a leak, how the password was originally gotten could have been a leak from Microsoft or something, or it could have just been an employee reusing a password.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, they probably don't even know. So there's no possible way.
Yeah, and I don't think, I don't think we're ever going to know. Like, I don't think we're going to get that information.
No, for sure. No,
I'm just saying, like, I'm not quick to jump on Microsoft or anybody for a breach like that.
Yeah.
Well, except for the employee. The employee should have taken better care of their security, but I wouldn't extend that blame up the ladder.
I tend to agree. So, sticking with Microsoft, we have Azure Security Lab. So, this has been around since August of last year.
Well, so specifically, this isn't so much about that. It's about the research challenge, which they started here. Which this one just started on the 5th. So the research challenge so obviously Azure has their bug bounty program. This is kind of like a sub-part. And actually just taking out chat, Drugi mentions, it didn't look like it contained the crown jewel. Seems more like miscellaneous projects across the company. And yeah, it's basically, it seems like the GitHub was being used for projects that would likely go public soon, or very small projects, just they needed something really quick, didn't want to use like an internal repo for it, like a couple people working on something type deal. It's nothing too earth-shattering as far as we can tell.
Yeah.
So jumping back towards this, the Azure Security Lab, specifically the research challenge, we sometimes will cover some new bounties coming out. So this is one. Azure Sphere is basically Microsoft's attempt at increasing IoT security. we've talked a number of times about kind of bad IoT security. So what Azure Sphere is it is a IoT device, so hardware. Well, it's a IoT security solution, is what they call it. It involves hardware. They've got their own custom silicon, custom operating system called Sphere OS, which is based on Linux, and it has a cloud component, the security service, which runs in the Azure cloud. What they've opened up with their bounty is the Azure bounty also has a research challenge, which generally just higher payments for targeting a specific component or like something specific. They'll have a challenge for the research to be done and a deadline for it. So this challenge is running from June 1st through August 31st. And it's focused on, I have to reopen the window, sorry. It's focused on it's focused on the Azure Sphere stuff. So in particular, ability to execute code on Pluton is $100,000. Pluton is their root of trust. And then you've got, I think I mentioned $100,000, and then they've also got the Secure World in general, also $100,000. And their Secure World is more their platform. Kind of the whole. Sorry, go ahead.
When I see Secure World, like the most common place you see that is when you're talking about things like Trust Zone. That's why I was wondering if they were employing Trust Zone and that's what they were talking about there with Secure World, or if it was like their own term.
So this is the link that actually the Secure World goes to, which is like their sandbox container that the device operates within.
Okay, fair enough.
Or that your application will operate within in the device.
So it's not quite Trust Zone, they kind of repurpose it.
No, like
but same idea.
Trust Zone, I think, is more like Pluto. Or what was that? Pluton? Sorry?
Pluton, I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, Pluton. Which is their root of trust. Their hardware-based root of trust. And these whole chips, like this is, you can get one of the Sphere dev kits. Like it is a hardware system here. That said, it does have the cloud component. It does have the operating system. And they're basically offering up to $100,000 to break either the operating system or the root of trust. So and
that's running for 3 months, right? From June 1st to August 31st.
Yes. Yeah, and then of course anything that's eligible just on the normal Azure program. So that's with the security service that's running in Azure Cloud. There's just a bonus, like 20% additional award for vulnerabilities are rated critical, 10% for vulns rated important.
Yeah. Part of the reason I stole the tab from you earlier by accident was I was trying to figure out what architecture that Azure OS or Sphere OS ran, just because I was curious if it was using something like Trust Zone in its like structure, because I'm guessing it's running ARM. Yeah, ARM Cortex. So because anything with IoT is most likely going to be running ARM. So yeah, I was just wondering if they use Trust Zone, but I don't see anything.
It seems like this is their own thing. That's why they've got their own bounty set up on.
No, I know, but like you could integrate Trust Zone to help enforce your own thing too. You know what I mean? Because that's it was just something I was thinking about. It was just like a curiosity. But one thing I will say about that bounty, like the 100,000, it's perfectly timed. I mean, right now, you know what I mean. If you're looking for like a lucrative bounty while you're not working. Because of the COVID stuff or anything like that, this is probably an area that is worth looking at. And like Drew was saying in chat, MediaTek, MediaTek's pretty terrible. You could probably find some stuff in there, so it might be worth looking at for some of you out there who are looking for like a bounty to get involved in that doesn't pay like pennies, like a lot of web bounties do.
Yeah, like we mentioned though, it is time sensitive, and they do change the research challenge. So like the last one was VM escapes for $300,000. And they've had, I think looks like also the Azure Security Lab, obtaining administrative access to the Azure Security Lab was also $300,000. That said, that's no more. That's closed challenge. And I do think this idea of doing the challenges is interesting. I wasn't aware of this before.
Yeah, I wasn't either, but it's like, so they do like rotating challenges, I guess?
Yeah.
It's kind of neat.
Yeah, so this particular one is the upcoming challenge, and you do have to apply to participate in it. So the deadline for that is the 15th.
Okay. So, yeah, it's only like 4 days away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how involved the application process is, but it is something to consider.
Yeah, I mean, that was one question I kind of had.
Doesn't look like there's much to it. Just email, name, company, experience. Of course, they might just reject your application for whatever reason. I have no idea.
So one thing I was going to ask is, like, they had that, you have to buy the hardware to be able to test with, right?
Well, you don't have... There are other components besides just the hardware. You can test the cloud component, the security service, without buying the hardware. So you don't have to buy the hardware.
But did they have prices up for the hardware for people who would want to look at that?
I'm sure you could find it. Or you apply for the dev kit, I'm not sure. If the prices are, they'll be available somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if you spotted it where I didn't, so
I didn't even look.
I figured I'd ask. Oh, okay, fair enough. But yeah, I mean that like 100K when you're looking at, 6 figures, it's definitely worth at least checking out. So wanted to bring it up. So getting into exploits, we have hijacking routers.
Well, so before we change, actually, looks like if you click on those, you are able to see the prices, or you're able to get a buy now page. So presumably you do have to pay. The buy now link itself doesn't seem to be working for me, but oh, there we go.
Usually those boards aren't super expensive, so it'd be still no price tag, really.
No, it's giving me other places to go and buy from.
I hate it when sites are like that, man. You gotta follow the rabbit hole.
$75 for what looked like the largest board, so maybe the most expensive board, but that is just kind of a guess.
That's not bad at all, honestly. That's pretty good. Like that's not unreasonable. Some of those boards that you see for stuff like that, you're looking at like hundreds of dollars, so that's better than I thought it would be.
Maybe some of these are more expensive too. I just looked at the one.
Yeah. So getting into routers, we have hijacking Centurylink routers. So this post seems to be a myriad of issues that just compound to allow hijacking the routers. It seems there was like 3 major issues. No access control on admin functionality. They had no CSRF protection, apparently. And because of that, they were able to just disable the admin password on the admin panel setup page.
Yeah, that's the gist of it. Basically, crazy. You could make a post request to the advanced setup _admin.cgi page and just set admin pw state to 0 in that request, and that would disable the admin password, at which point you can do whatever you want. And I mean, that just comes down to, well, I think the biggest thing there is that insufficient access control. The CSRF matters, no doubt, but if there was access control that would prevent you from making any of those requests, then the CSRF would be much harder to exploit. In this case, you can do it yourself. You don't need to really trick anybody into visiting your page to get that CSRF attack. You make the request yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why I'm surprised. I mean, routers are kind of one of those areas that you don't expect anything to be done right in, really. I hate on routers every day, especially the ones we get in Canada.
Sounds like you've got an interesting life. That's how you spend your days.
Oh, that is how I spend my days, yeah. Because all of our routers in Canada are bad. Like, they can all go in the dumpster fire.
You keep saying that. I haven't had the issues you've had.
Maybe Saskatchewan makes different routers, okay? I don't know.
Still in Canada. If you want to generalize to Canada, you have to generalize.
Okay, fair enough.
Anyway, I don't want to, turn into just getting mad at routers.
Okay.
There's no need to shout at them. They're simple.
They have feelings.
Simple devices. Nonetheless, it's a really straightforward issue here. like we mentioned, it's literally you make a post to disable the password, and then you can do whatever you want.
So there was something I found kind of interesting, and it's not in the issue itself, it's in the disclosure information. So these issues were disclosed on December 9th, and apparently they shipped a private fix for testing on February 27th, but a patch for the general public was never put out. So it just never made it out of that like private testing phase. Seems really weird. I don't know if it just like got buried among other things like logistically, but
decided it wasn't important enough. I mean,
won't fix. I mean, this seems weird. Usually, like you see companies that either take it seriously or they don't. But here it's like kind of like a mix of the two. It
that's
looks
weird.
Like it got lost in the mix. So
I agree. It is weird. They sent a notification of the pending disclosure. Granted, it's 3 days before they actually disclose.
I mean, they asked for a follow-up.
Yeah, and that's fair. Like they did ask for that follow-up a month before that.
Yeah, just a weird disclosure timeline. But yeah, the issues themselves aren't too interesting, and that's pretty much par for the course with router stuff. So.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, those types of issues still happen. You still need to look for them.
Yeah. So our next issue is kind of funny, because I remember, Z, you wanted to talk about it, and then you wanted to drop it, and then you wanted to talk about it again, because you found something interesting in it. So
no,
I was just curious why you...
That's not at all. I didn't find anything interesting in it. I did want to drop it, and then I figured we wouldn't because I ended up dropping the other hacker one because it was even worse.
Okay.
I had another vulnerability that we were going to talk about that was even less interesting. I mean, so this one it's not that it's terribly uninteresting. Effectively, all that's happened here, and the reason why I was going to drop is because, well, they paid out a bounty for this issue, I think $560 bounty. They will not pay out bounties for this issue going forward. So that's why I was going to drop this one, because it was deemed as just being out of scope. And it's essentially a sort of denial of service against Twitter, basically coming by sending it more information than it expects to receive, which ends up in some way basically eating up enough CPU or hanging one of the applications.
Yeah, just resource starving it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to say what they spammed here. Yeah, the %2f, so /a/a/a/a over and over and over for one of their moments. And basically just ignoring what the maximum length was, and that ends up causing the hang or crash within the Twitter app.
So I will say I found it kind of interesting how you could copy a link to the tweet and then send it to others, and you can make them basically like self-DOS themselves. It's not too often you see something like that, or at least I don't really see like stuff like that too often. So I found that a little bit interesting.
I mean, that's kind of the standard way for like exploiting a lot of like the RE-DOS type issues, which I don't think this is, but those types of issues that are kind of client-sided denial of service. I mean, sending off the link is really how you're going to... Anything that's client-side, I guess, when it comes down to it.
I guess what I should say is I don't really see client denial of service at all. It's just not something that, like, server denial of service, obviously, yeah, that's a bit more, interesting for people who want to do malicious stuff. But client-side denial of service, you don't really see too often.
I think part of that's because companies just don't care about it. Like we said, Twitter now isn't accepting this as a bounty anymore. Like, they accepted this one, but... they do
DOS
mention...
isn't really my thing. It's just not up my alley. I'm not interested in it. I don't care about DOS.
Yeah, and
ever,
I guess,
really.
To be fair with this one, it does cause like an HTTP 500. So it is an error on the server, something's happening too. Granted, like the manifestation of that is the client-side crash. But in sending they mention 2 megabyte payload, they end up getting an HTTP 500 error.
One thing I will say that is kind of cool though is it's cool that they did pay him and then made it out of scope. They could have just been like, well, we're not going to consider this in scope.
Well, no, they really can't. Not when they publish. Not when they publish. If you do something like that, people are going to get very upset. If you decide midway through, after already publishing your terms, to change your terms. And I don't believe HackerOne would let them do that.
I don't know. I feel like we've seen it before, but
they can reject it, but there should be that room for appealing at least. That said, they didn't do it, so I'm not going to speculate on what would happen if they did.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, like, you know, I didn't think HackerOne would. I feel like we've seen it before, but anyway, yeah, I just wanted to say that was kind of cool that, you know, they paid him out before making it out of scope, but now these types of issues with Twitter, they're not going to get you nothing. So basically, moral of the story: don't bother with DOS. It's just it's not.
Well, no, DOS is still a fair issue that will get paid out on. Well, so I guess this does actually mention that issues that result in denial of service to Twitter servers at the network or application layer are now out of scope for future reports. So I guess they won't pay out on DOS at all. But I mean, it's still worth looking at those types of issues. Other places do, but in particular, this one. Yeah, I mean, it's basically you're sending a large payload. Classic test case. Yeah.
So getting into some more interesting issues, we have a tale of verbose error messages and a JWT token. So this one was pretty interesting. This person was basically testing using the authorize extension for Burp Suite and found that they were hitting HTTP 500 errors, but the responses were like really large. I think they said they were like almost like 10 kilobytes in size.
Yeah, so let me mention here that the authorize extension doesn't really matter too much for this. All it does is it would send, when you made a request through the Burp proxy, if you're not familiar with Burp, it's a web proxy that's often used for doing like web pen tests where basically you can intercept, you can modify the traffic. It has some other things built into it for testing. It's a test suite, essentially. So the authorize extension will, any request that comes through, it'll make the request using another set of cookies, so it'll swap out the cookies, and it'll make a request without the cookies to that same endpoint. So that way you just kind of automate testing, one, making sure other users can't access cross-user horizontal authentication bypasses. And also just not having any authentication make sure those pages won't be accessible in that case also. Just automating testing of that. So go ahead, Spectre.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you know, they hit those 500 errors and found the responses were really large, which is pretty abnormal. Most of the time when you get error pages like that, it's basically just the error code and that's it.
Well, so you do see, I mean, yeah, you could have a large error page. I mean, the error page can, YouTube, for example, dumps a pretty large blob of base64 data your page, which isn't all that unexpected. It's unexpected in this case just because the other error points don't do that. The one in particular did. So what's actually kind of important here also is, as it mentions, it's a tale of verbose error message and JWT token. So what is important is during the testing, while testing this application, we're not told what the application is. Just to be clear, as we're just talking about an application. That's because we're not actually told what it is. Just it's similar to GitHub in the fact that you could create kind of public and private repositories or projects, not actually repositories, sorry. You can collaborate. One of the features was the ability to duplicate a project. So you have whatever project, and this one, the reason why that feature stood out to this tester is because it required a JWT, so JSON Web Token, which we've talked about issues with before. That, unlike most of the application used the cookies that we were just talking about before, there were a couple features or 3 features that needed these JWT tokens for some reason. Um, and that was duplicating the project, downloading a project as a zip, and writing files to the project. What he found was that the unauthenticated request to this duplicated project, so if you were authenticated as another user, you didn't get this, but you got an HTTP 500 response when you tried to duplicate a project without any of the cookies and without the JWT. Spectre was just getting on. That one in particular was much longer than any of the other responses. And if we actually take a look at the screenshot from it, you'll kind of notice that you get, or at least this is what I noticed from it. The response there, it's a JSON blob. It has an error as the kind of main entry. And then you've got another object kind of nested in there, which has a message containing full HTML in it, including what looks to be a, or at least I thought it looked like a stack trace, although looking at it right now, I'm actually not seeing that. But what you do notice is you've got this full HTML page in there, and you've got a bunch of headers in there also. So what I think's going on here is you had an application that would authenticate with another server. So you'd hit this endpoint, this duplicate project or whatever, you'd hit that endpoint, and it would proxy the request over to another server. And it would pass that JWT token to do the authorization. And then in this case, it wasn't expecting to handle any sort of error. So it gets that 500. It's like, I don't know what to do with this. Let's just dump everything back to the client, which is generally bad practice. You want to handle your error messages, basically give a minimal amount of information. So what's interesting in this is you basically get to see some of the headers that get added by that proxy, which ends up including kind of it crafts its own token if you don't provide one, which is kind of the core of the issue here. It crafts its own token, which they refer to as it's basically a God token. Although it doesn't sound like it's actually a God token. It sounds, what they determined was that if you made this request to duplicate a project without authentication, it would generate a new user and issue a token to that user with privileges to whatever project you're trying to duplicate. The endpoint would error out for whatever reason that they didn't know, but that token could then, because it got exposed here because of the error, could be used on other requests and would give you access to whatever project that token was created for. It's a very roundabout way of saying making this request resulted in an error that contained too much information, exposed the JWT that was valid for, or that would be valid for whatever project you wanted.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the interesting part, right? Is you can use the tokens to both download projects as zip files and write into projects.
Yeah, so like the JWT probably just has the grant for like just for the project itself. It doesn't do the granular permissions over you can duplicate or you can edit or you can write. It's probably just the JWT probably just includes that grant for the project itself.
Yeah. Now, I remember that this is kind of limited by the fact that the projects are given unique UIDs. So you have to have a unique UID of a project you want to hit. So, there is that bit of a limiting factor on it. I think in this article, though, they even argue they could have made the UUID even stronger to try to, prevent hitting this issue. Obviously, you would just want to patch out the issue. But I think they mentioned here that, if they had a stronger UUID system, that it might have been, less easy to hit, basically.
Yeah, well, so you do need to be, like I said, you need to be able to predict what that UID is, or what the project ID is, but the UUID. I don't know how predictable this one is. Like, I don't know if that's a case to it or something, which then is maybe a little bit less predictable than if all of that is random. I don't think it's mentioned in here either. Nonetheless, it is recommended when you have public IDs not to use just a single incrementing number but to use a UUID for it. That is just kind of a generally accepted best practice. Now, internally, you could still use just an integer ID, but what you want to expose to a user are those more randomized, harder to predict ID values.
Yeah, I think they even have at the bottom there, using UUIDs instead of numeric IDs can be a good defense in depth against IDORs, which...
Yeah, because I mean, if somebody can't predict what they are, it doesn't really matter if you can leak it or get access. That said, in targeted cases, of course, you can still use that.
So, do you want to get back to routers? Our router hate? We'll get back on the router hate train. Our next article is about pentesting Cisco SD-WAN, and this one is another breaking routers article. And this one, I think our last episode was full of command injections, and they're coming back.
Yep, another command injection. This one is... I won't say it does something right, but it tries to. So the SSH daemon on this router, which is Cisco SD-WAN, so ISR 4300 or C1111X-8P. If you remember those, I'll be very surprised, but a couple Cisco routers. And it has an SSH daemon on it. That SSH daemon does use the force command directive in order to force it. When you log in, it'll execute whatever the force command is. It's not going to let you just execute your bash shell or whatever, so it executes this MCP package wrap command. And that command effectively just ends up looking here. I pulled it up on stream for those of you watching. If the SSH original command starts with SCP, it'll just evaluate whatever the original command was. So it seems like that's basically to let you SCP off the router fairly easily. The problem is, as you can see, it just looks for the string to start with SCP. It doesn't care what else comes in that string, just if it starts with SCP. So there's a pretty obvious injection there. Actually, it's brought up right at the start. SCP pipe ID or pipe ID. So OR ID, and it'll execute the ID also in addition to SCP. It starts with it, so it passes, but you get command injection because it doesn't care what comes next. It does all need to be one command. You can't just semicolon out of it. But other than that, you can do what you want. And they do go on to use this to gain root privileges in not a terribly interesting way. They look for a Squid binary. In this case, they find one that's B execute that. Just calls cat on a file name provided. Simply to let you read a file as root. It doesn't do like user bin cat or anything. It just uses cat, so you can set your own path and replace what binary gets executed as root to read the file name. Yeah. I do actually think the force command one, kind of the first code injection, is kind of interesting. The Squid binary is par for the course.
Yeah. I mean, I guess this is one of those situations where you give them a "at least you tried" sticker, I guess. I mean, yeah, just one of those silly oversights. This looks like somebody, they just kind of came in and they're like, "Oh, we need one of those SCPs. Oh, we got you. We'll just throw it in there." It just seems like one of those things that was just kind of thrown in.
Yeah, it's fair when you're thinking, okay, the original command, and it can only be one command there. Like, you can't. As far as I'm aware, that will, like, if you use the semicolon, that won't work. So, like, I could understand the thought process being, okay, well, so we have one command here. Let's just make sure it's SCP. Yeah. I can understand that, just not taking into account the rest of it. Or maybe you can't even use a semicolon there, but then I'm not sure why they wouldn't have.
Yeah. So our next post is actually from the same company. Different people, but same company. Now, I will be honest, I was a little bit disappointed at first. So it's two bugs in Squid, which is a web caching proxy. And when I saw memory leak and use after free in Squid, I found that kind of funny because I thought they meant memory leak as in, just not freeing memory. And the funny thing about that is they're kind of diametrically opposed. Usually if you're leaking memory, you're not freeing memory aggressively to have UAFs as well. It's kind of, two different ways. But they're talking about memory leak in terms of an information disclosure, which is obviously a lot more powerful for exploitation. It's just not as fun when you're talking about a memory leak fighting a use after free instead of an info disclosure fighting use after free. So I didn't manage to dig into this one too much because I was trying to figure out what they were talking about with the info leak here. It seems like they just kind of discovered it by accident. It didn't seem like they were really looking for it. They just sent a proxy authentication, or they got a proxy authentication required status code, and they just saw like a suspicious looking nonce in there, and then when they looked at it, it seemed to be leaking addresses.
They might not have been specifically looking for that issue. That said, they were obviously looking at Squid, and just that was something they noticed kind of pretty quickly, was that the nonce seems a little bit weird. So let's back up a little bit. The information disclosure is in digest authentication. So as I was kind of mentioned here, Squid is kind of a proxy system that you can use. It's quite customizable. You can do quite a bit with it. But just kind of imagine it as being like a proxy server. So you can set it up to require authentication. And if you're familiar with HTTP authentication methods, one of the options that you can do for this is using kind of digest authentication, which you might be familiar. In some cases, you can set this up in different ways. But if you visited a website that just had like the browser little pop-up box that asks for the username and password, that's probably using digest, or it's actually just sending the username and password in like base64, I think is the default. But one of the options is digest. And what that is effectively with digest authentication, you create a hash of the username, the password, the realm. The realm is just kind of a value for where the page type deal. Doesn't really matter in this case. All that matters is the authentication. You create a hash of the user, password, and that. You create a hash of the location. Then you hash both of those together with a nonce value. And that way you only send that last hash to the server. So the server never needs to know your username or password. It only needs to know the one hash that's created with your username, realm, and password. So the password never gets sent in clear text. In theory, the server never needs to know the password. I don't want to dive into that whole discussion, but it doesn't know the password, but your password just becomes that hash. And the server needs to know it so it can't store that hash securely. So in my opinion, it's worse, but either way, people have used this. What's important there is that server generated nonce. So you have the two hashes, you put a nonce between them, and you take the hash of that. The server needs to send you the nonce, which you'll see here. It sends this proxy authenticate, gives you the realm value, gives you the nonce value, gives you the quality of protection, some other flakes in there. The nonce value, so when they looked into how this nonce was generated, what they found is, and this is the first CV that they found, the nonce just kind of looked a little bit suspicious. The values in it seemed odd, just because of similarity over time. That kind of just looks like a memory address in there. So what they ended up finding here was that the way the nonce was generated, you have kind of the new nonce structure that they create. And inside of that, it has a pointer to itself. So kind of the new nonce data.self is just the pointer right back to its parent object. And when it's generating the nonce to actually send out, all it does is basically a base64 encoding of whatever binary data is in that object, or in the nonce data part of that object. So since it includes the self and gives that as the nonce, you basically get a pointer leak.
This is like almost exactly like that Apple issue we covered a little while ago. You remember the one in macOS where they had a kernel task port and they had a structure that they copied out to userland, and they had a back pointer to like a task port in the structure, and they just copied it out, like just straight up just had a pointer in there and nobody noticed.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely really similar. I mean, because this
similar parallel.
In this case, like, they're trying to generate just some roughly random value. So, I mean, it's a little bit similar, but I mean, at the same time, it looks like a random value, and if you're not actually looking at what's in there, nonce data, basics for whatever the binary is, whatever. And it does include some other stuff, to be fair. Inside of that nonce value, it does include a little bit of other data besides just the self. It includes actual random data coming from immersing twister, RNG, and the creation time as part of that nonce data. So it has some random values in there too. Or
you
can
definitely
unique
see
values.
how that would like sneak by. You can see for sure.
So they send that by, or they send that out. Their fix for it, though, rather than just removing the pointer to itself before they grab the base 64, they just decide to hash the data instead of, or they just decide to MD5 that nonce instead of just giving the base 64 of it.
Interesting solution.
It was an interesting solution, and of course, that's the second issue in here. Is that just didn't, or wasn't sufficient. And you can kind of imagine why. As I was mentioning, there's somewhat known data in the nonce itself. So one of the fields of the nonce is the creation time. You're going to know that as an attacker because you make the request. So you're going to know when the request is made, and you're going to be able to know what that creation time is, assuming it's not down to the milliseconds, which it wasn't. Although even if it was, that's just 1,000 possibilities. And the other one, though, was that did include some random data from the Merson Twister random number generator. Now, this part of the issue actually reminds me of an issue Facebook had where Facebook session tokens were broken in a very similar way. So what goes on with the Twister RNG is it gets seeded by time, and when Squid handles its very first request coming through, it'll seed it just with the time, and then its number of nonces generated. Each time you request the new random number generator, just kind of increments a counter by 1 as it goes through the entire state of the RNG. So if you know the number of nonces that have been generated, or the number of times it's been called, number of bytes read out from it, and you know the time that it started, you're able to predict what the RNG will output next. So they were able to take advantage of that. If you can cause the server to crash, or otherwise know the value of the time at which the server restarted, you can, as I mentioned, you can predict the RNG. So then you know the value of the RNG, you know the creation time. So then the only unique value in that hash is the pointer. So you can brute force the pointer to still leak it. So the hash just didn't work. And as I was mentioning about Facebook, is I believe quite a while back, I want to say like 2008, 2009, somewhere in there, I think. Maybe a little bit later. I don't think it will have been much later than that. Facebook's used kind of the default setting for PHP session tokens, which were basically dealt with in the exact same way. So if you were able to crash, or just waited for Facebook to crash or restart, you were able to predict all the session tokens coming out and log in as other users because of that.
Makes sense.
That said, so in this case, they do need to crash the server to actually abuse this attack they mentioned. And there's a lot of ways you could do that. I mean, one of my favorite would be the tow truck attack. Just drive a tow truck into it. But they didn't go that route.
That's expensive.
Yeah, well, expensive for whoever's running the server. That said, the use after free that was mentioned at the outset is kind of how they ended up getting the crash.
Funnily enough, the use after free seemed easier to understand than the info leak, and usually it's the other way around. I thought that was kind of funny.
I think the info leak's kind of straightforward. It dumps the data and includes a pointer. Either way,
sure. It's not hard, but it's just I found the UAF actually a little bit more accessible for some reason.
Well, do you want to go ahead and explain it then?
No, you can go ahead. You're doing a good job.
All right. So with the use after free, basically the nonce ends up having a 16-bit reference counter. That used as part of like garbage collection. As soon as that hits 0, it can go ahead and free it. 16-bit is a little bit small, so basically every time it increments every time you get a new request coming in, decrements when the request completed. But since it's kind of small, you can basically make enough requests to overflow the counter before the user request object gets garbage collected. Leading to a use after free because it'll get garbage collected before the owner object does. So the owner object will try and delete it. And away you go with the crash. So that's how they were able to get the crash, so that they could abuse the exploits that we were just talking about.
It's kind of fun because usually, I mean, I haven't really seen reference count overflows like that outside of kernel very much.
No, I can't say I've looked, but I haven't either, really.
Yeah, it's kind of rare to see in like userland and stuff like that. But this is just one example of why for reference counts you always want to use a size T or like a 64-bit type, because overflow, like even if there is a theoretical overflow on the ref count, overflowing a 64-bit ref count is damn hard. It's basically impossible to do in practice. So it's one of those kind of defense in depth things. So yeah, you still have a bug. You could technically overflow the ref count, but if you have the ref count set at a size that's, large enough, you're not really going to get hit with it in practice. And this is kind of a good example of that. If this was like even a 32-bit ref count, they might not have been able to get away with this.
Yeah, or at least we've taken a lot more time, but that said, I mean, this is a pretty loud attack regardless.
Yeah.
So I will mention that detail of it.
Yeah, I will say, maybe I'm wrong. So they just use the UAF for the crash, right? For the DOS?
Yeah, they didn't actually go on to exploit the UAF, as far as I know.
I was going to say, in this situation, it doesn't actually look like the UAF could be exploitable beyond that, really. This looks like it would be really... I don't know how you would get controlled data into the freed object with this, with this kind of attack surface.
I don't know. I mean,
it's possible, but it probably
I could imagine a couple ways that would maybe result in it. That said, you have to play with the application to really know.
You have to really mess with it, yeah.
Yeah.
Overall, though, pretty cool. It's cool to see that kind of issue, like I was saying earlier, outside of kernel, because it's just not too often you see that. So, but speaking of kernel, and so ZDI has been going off lately. We were talking a little bit about it before the stream, but what have they done? Like 3 posts or something? You said,
yeah.
In the last,
so
week.
We kind of mentioned last week how it feels like we're always covering ZDI. And yeah, so back in January, they did no write-ups. We didn't cover any, they didn't put any out. They did put out some blog posts, but no write-ups. In February, they did 1. Well, last month, they did 1 a week. And now they've already put out 3 posts this month, or 3 write-ups this month, covering 6 different bugs. Or at least 6 different bugs, so... It seems like they're ramping up, yeah. And I mean, I do like most of their posts, so I'm not complaining about that, but it does feel like we cover them quite a bit.
Yeah, we are now the ZDI podcast.
Just kidding. I think they have their own podcast.
Do they actually? I never
well, not Z, because part of Trend Micro, I'm pretty sure does.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. So yeah, I think they did 2 this week, and we were kind of trying to decide between the 2 of them which one we wanted to cover, and we
3
chose
this week. There was one done today.
Yeah, there was one done today. That's right. So this was a Windows kernel bug, and it was found in Win32k. Not really a huge surprise. Win32k is kind of the Achilles heel of Windows. So they break down a lot of the background to all the functions involved. If you're not too familiar with Windows stuff, it might confuse you a little bit, because it is using the Windows API and everything. But it seemed like the issue basically boiled down to a function being mislabeled. They had a function called Microsoft Telemetry Assert triggered no args km. It's like the longest function name ever, and it has assert in the name. You would figure it would throw an exception, or it would terminate the process if an assertion failed. It turns out it was just mislabeled. It wasn't actually an assert.
I don't know if I'll say it was mislabeled. So it's Microsoft Telemetry Assert triggered no args cam. So that could be that it's Microsoft Telemetry. Assert was triggered. So called after an assert was triggered, not actually triggering the assert itself. And no args cam. So I could understand why this is named. I won't say it's just mislabeled. That said, the issue
it could have been named better.
The issue is pretty straightforward here because you have, so jumping back just a little bit, in this particular function that's vulnerable, the NT user resolve desktop for WoW, which is called from userland, implemented in kernel. It's a syscall, userland wrapper. It takes a in and out parameter, just a pointer that's going to get the value or the return value placed into it. And it does some checks on the validity of the data. It checks, of course, that the pointer is to userland data because you don't want the kernel, you don't want to be able to use that to tell the kernel to overwrite something in the kernel, of course. It checks it copies all the fields into local kernel memory and checks that the length is less than the max length. Obviously, again, making sure that you're not going to overflow any buffers, and that the buffer itself exists entirely within userland, so you can't give it a big number and get it to go into kernel area or overflow, whatever. So the issue here, just kind of giving you that background because it's going to matter for the actual exploit. The issue is that it does this one check that was added in early on. It just goes and checks if the length and 1.
And so checking if it's odd, basically.
Well, yeah, checking if it's odd because the length should always be even for. They do explain why that's the case, right? Unicode string, so it's always 2 bytes. Every character is at least 2 bytes, so you can't have an odd length string. So it just checks that. Simple check. Calls that assert, presumably thinking that it is an assert and not just this telemetry call or whatever. And then in the else of that is where it performs all these checks, like the maximum length checked. So what ends up happening, though, is because Microsoft Telemetry, it does return. It's not an assert. It returns. So you basically, if you send it the odd-sized buffer, or the odd-sized length, it'll just skip all the checks and go right into the rest of it.
Walk right around them.
Yeah. So that's the core of the issue. They do go into, of course, exploiting this. And you can kind of maybe see where this is going, given by what I mentioned earlier, where, there's that concern about copying in and out of kernel memory. You can actually erase this. You pass in an appropriate Unicode string that it'll accept. The kernel verifies that the buffer is safe, and then the userland modifies it before the kernel actually ends up using or before the kernel copies in all the checks, because again, it doesn't do all of those checks. So when you give it that odd size length, it's going to skip all of the checks. And then the kernel land. Sorry, I've kind of confused myself here.
Yeah, no, I was a little bit confused on that too. The way they were talking about doing the time of check, time of use between the userland and kernel buffers. It's just probably because of my lack of experience with Windows, honestly.
Yeah, well, so it seems to me that effectively you're sending it in, it's going to check that length, and then it's just going to carry on with the call in the kernel land. That's where I've kind of confused myself here, because what I've got written down is basically kernel verifies the buffer safe, userland modifies the buffer, kernel mode continues. So it seems like at least some of those checks must still be happening for there to be that period for the kernel to verify, because it's not just skipping them, which is what it makes it seem like. It's just skipping it. Like that, it's just inside of this else statement. So that's kind of where I'm now a little bit confused. I didn't notice this before.
Yeah, I was under the impression that that was the same thing, that it was just basically skipping that else branch and skipping all the bounds checking.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to make the guess here that right in the kernel implementation itself, so after it makes the context switch. So these things that we're seeing, the else statement is probably in the user land. Or it's probably still user land, so before things get copied. So there's probably just some... Yeah, I'm not sure now. I mean, I'm trying to come up with a reason here, but it seems like I just possibly misunderstood the vulnerability here.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to do just because Windows, the way that they do stuff between userland and kernel is quite different from Linux.
You know what? My issue here is, sorry, they talk about the talk to, but they're not talking about that as how they actually went to exploit it. They were using that as just a example of kind of the type of issue that this is trying to prevent. The actual issue is, as we were saying there, the vulnerability here is, after this November 2019 update, which adds this check, if the length is odd, the execution will just continue and all the checks are skipped. That is how it is. I wrote down the talk to issue because they do just explain what the time of check, time of use issue is. But they're using that. Here we go. In the code there, they're using that just as consider the following scenario, using that as an example of how this could be abused. By the actual issue, everything is skipped. So that confusion was just kind of my own bad notes.
So one thing I will say here is, obviously I can understand why they wouldn't do it. But it kind of sucks that they didn't show how you could weaponize the exploit. And the reason I say that is, I'm pretty sure Windows kernel now, at least a lot of it is has CFI now. I think Windows kernel is getting stronger in trying to prevent post exploitation, or exploitation post memory corruption. So it would be cool to see how you could get around some of those mitigations. But obviously, that's not in the post. They don't weaponize it, but that would be kind of cool to see if you could get around CFI and stuff like that, or if CFI even affects this area. I don't even know. But
yeah, I don't know offhand.
But that could be an interesting,
I mean, I'm sure people have gotten around some CFI stuff, though. I mean, this isn't the only Windows vulnerability that's been found recently.
Oh no, for sure. But what I'm saying is, I haven't seen any posts that go into a lot of detail about how they got around the CFI. And I just think that would be cool to see. So it'd be cool if there was a follow-up on that. But I'm not expecting anybody to do it out there.
I mean,
it's probably not
there haven't been a ton of write-ups really in terms, just in general, when it comes to defeating some of the newer mitigations.
Yeah, we need to get to work on that. We need to buy a big Windows internals book, and we'll jump into that area.
When is Volume 2 coming out?
Wasn't it supposed to be this year or something?
It's supposed to be the last 4 years.
Oh, okay.
It keeps getting pushed.
Maybe it'll come out next year.
I don't think it's coming.
It'll come the year that we have the year of the Linux desktop.
Or, yeah, maybe. Either way, it's been getting pushed for a while.
Yeah. So, Samsung. So, this one, I'm pretty sure... So, the title of this next article is Samsung Android Multiple Interactionless RCEs. Is this the one where you said they had that was a massive understatement because there was thousands on thousands?
Yeah, so this is the one I was talking about where they say multiple interactionless RCEs, and they, as a result of this is a quote here, as a result of my fuzzing, I identified 5,218 unique crashes. And a lot of these are reasonably exploitable looking. I obviously haven't written into all of them, and there's some concerns over it, but jumping back about what was actually getting fuzzed, just takes me a while to scroll up through all of that, is that there's this Skia, SKIA library that's used to load and display images through various kind of standard APIs. And that could be used, obviously to do images that are displayed like as part of the APK itself or as part of a APK, but that'll also include images from untrusted sources. So like MMS messages, chat applications, emails, web browser, gallery app, whatever. We'll also be using this. Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Seems like a perfect target. So that's what they start fuzzing and looking at. And they, in particular, I think they focused on these QM or QMG, QMAG images, which I'm actually not terribly familiar with at all, but that's mostly what they were fuzzing was this one particular type of image that I had never heard of before.
That's probably exactly why they were fuzzing it too, is because it's not a common file format, so it's probably got bugs in it.
So they talk a lot about their motivation for that, and yeah, that's part of it. They also released a fuzzing harness for doing the same sort of fuzzing yourself.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And these have all apparently been fixed according to the timeline, which I find quite impressive, but it was also seemed like they had a good chunk of time.
Yeah.
Either way,
the 28th, or 28th of January, I should say.
Yeah, so I mean, it goes into some detail about how the fuzzing was done, like using libdislocator instead of just the standard malloc, which just adds guards around the allocation so you can detect the heap-based overwrites a lot easier, or overflows. Anyway, getting into what was actually found here, though, they have a breakdown of the crashes. Being that they have... So the majority of the crashes that they had were in what they refer to as just a read one byte. And they talk about kind of how they classified all of these. So they have like read 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. You're generally reading up to different sized words. Is the crash happened on it trying to read an invalid memory address, trying to read this amount from that. So read 1 was the most common, which on the face of it, initially I'm thinking, okay, if it's only reading 1 byte, only one byte is actually being read there, that might not be too exploitable. That said, more likely I would imagine that exists inside of a loop. That's just kind of iterating over what it thinks is a string and kind of keeps going out into out of bounds memory. So it just happens to crash on the 1 byte. At least that would be my guess on it. So there's a good chance that some of these are still exploitable, even if, read 1 doesn't necessarily sound that bad.
So I was thinking it kind of makes sense that there was a lot of read 1s just because, it's, off by 1s are very easy mistakes to make compared to like an off by 16, for example.
Yeah, but I don't know if because, off by 1, though, if you're reading an integer, it's going to be a read 4. Well, if you're reading a 32-bit integer, it's going to be a read 4. Like, the read 1 is literally, it's only reading 1 byte.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm kind of tempted to say it's a loop. It's more likely going to be some loops iterating over the bytes of the image, I guess. Probably not a string, but just the bytes in the image.
Yeah, it's possible.
I would imagine it's a loop more so than just a bunch of actual, like, standalone read 1 byte. I guess it could be too, but either way, there's a lot of them. That's the majority of them. But there are obviously the writes. Some of them did fail on writes. Sigabort is another one they captured, which is like your stack smashing Sigabort. They only have 3 of those, but they did find some of those also. It sounded like you were going to say something, Spectre?
I was just going to say, so these read 1s are like any of these like reads out of bounds. I wonder how many of them are in like heap allocated data and how many of them are in stack allocated buffers. Because the reason I say that is I want to say like read 1s or the read -1s or whatever, however you want to say it, on the heap are going to be probably easier to exploit than the ones on the stack.
Well, so they don't really
given the amount of control you have over the heap, especially in kernel. Like
this is just the classification of the crashes. It's just what instruction did it crash on. So they don't go into what the memory itself was, or even if an attacker, like how much control the attacker had over it. It's just it died on this. It could be after use after free, for example, that result in that. It could be, as you were saying, or as I've been saying, like the loop. So reading over some particular memory. It could be a number of things. It's just a lot of crashes.
Another thing I just thought of, actually, is I find it interesting they caught so many read 1s and read 2s. And the reason I say that is the way they caught these crashes, right, is through the SAN, right, address sanitizer. And the way address sanitizer recognizes out-of-bounds writes is it places red zones, right? So anywhere that is not in bounds of a buffer is marked as a red zone, and if a write or a read happens there, that triggers a crash, right? That's how a SAN basically does it. Now, typically with like 1 and 2 byte writes, those are so small that they usually don't hit a red zone. Usually, like out of bounds writes by only like 1 to 4 bytes, or even sometimes 1 to 8 bytes, just don't hit a red zone and they don't get detected. So I do find it interesting that they managed to find so many that were just like 1 byte out or something like that. Yeah, I find that kind of interesting.
Well, that's kind of why I was speculating that, you know, it could be things in a loop, so it's actually just incrementing it's just incrementing like an index. That would kind of give you a much longer read if it didn't happen to just hit the red zone, or it didn't happen to hit whatever the trigger condition was.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just something I was thinking about when I was reading it. I was like, they're using a SAN, so this is kind of curious.
Well, they're using a SAN, and they're using libdislocator. Okay. Which they mention which they talk about early on about that.
Yeah, that's what they were using for their fuzzing harness, right? Or
no, dislocator is a replacement for malloc.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, sorry. I was thinking of something else. Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, it's
a lot of issues.
That's a lot of issues, yeah.
And we're talking about the read, but obviously, like I said, they did the writes, SIG aborts. They do have some nullity references in there. Exploitability, if that's probably going to be pretty low. Also mem copies.
It seemed a lot of, like, just reading it there, it seems quite a few of their nullity refs came from just not checking the return of malloc to see if it failed, which is... It is a fairly common bug, but it's not an interesting one because you can't do anything with it. So
yeah, at least not anymore.
Not anymore. Yeah, they killed our fun. So yeah, a lot of issues. I'm surprised they fixed that many issues, even though they had like a few months. That is pretty impressive. You got to give them credit.
Well, so I guess before I did say that, but yeah, so Samsung rolled out their May 2020 update, including fixes for these QMage bugs. And yeah, so I also mentioned the fuzzing harness was released, so that's available. I'll have the link down in the description.
For anybody who's interested in fuzzing, for sure. I'm guessing it probably uses...
Well, it's specifically for the graphics library.
Yeah. I'm guessing it probably uses protobuf, since it's Google.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it at all.
Anyway, might be worth checking out still for people who are interested in that. But yeah, we'll keep it rolling on the kernel topic, and we'll roll right into Linux. So we have a Linux futex virtual file system use after free. So this one is quite complex, and I mean complex even as far as kernel bugs go. It's a bug reported by Jan Horn, and Jan Horn, he's like a really, really smart guy. He's like really into Linux. It's kind of like the Ian Beer of Linux, if you know who that is from Apple stuff. And the bug seems to be in the get futex key function, which holds a reference to an inode. But for some reason, he couldn't even really figure out exactly why, but it seemed if you didn't hold a mount point reference, or if you had a callback in the superblock destruction code, that inode can end up getting torn down while it's being used, and obviously that triggers a use after free. So futex is, for people who don't know, it basically stands for a fast user space mutex. they're honestly not used very often. In fact, I don't think I've ever used one. I don't know if you've ever used one, Z. I don't know if I know anyone who's ever used one. They're like really low level. So that's part of the reason why this subsystem is so complex, and why even Jan Horn doesn't know 100% what's going on here. It's kind of applying guesswork to an issue that he found. And what makes it even more interesting is if you scroll down to the bottom, he even says, I'm not even sure how you'd go about fixing it, or something to that effect. It's one of those like weird bugs that it's like, okay, I can see it, I can reproduce it, but it's such a weird subsystem that I don't even know what's causing it, really. So it's one of those cool, generally when you're talking about kernel, you're already dealing with a hard subject matter, but this one seems to be like on a whole nother level of like just absolutely crazy. And that makes sense, because you're talking about virtual file system stuff. That stuff generally does get like, that is basically as complex as you can get in the kernel, in my opinion. So
I mean, the gist of it, though, as you mentioned, is you have the futex being used around a file mapping, and the futex itself only goes for so the get futex key. It'll access, as you mentioned, that inode directly, rather than doing a slow walk through the VMA tree and actually finding the file. The futex just goes straight to that underlying page via the get user pages fast function. It only sees that inode, so it's not holding, as you mentioned, it's not holding that reference to the mount point. So if you do destroy that mount point, which will implicitly destroy the inode, it's not going to know about it. It's not going to receive any notification. It's like, I don't think it's too hard to get the core issue here. Exactly why that happens, I mean, so that's where maybe it's a little bit confusing, but at the very least, like, the core issue here is it's basically just skipped a step for the purposes of performance by not doing that slow walk through the entire tree to find the page properly and actually get the full struct. It just has the inode value. So I don't think it's that complicated to understand that core issue.
Well, it's more the fact that he's not even exactly sure which path triggers it, right? Because he's not sure if it was the mount point exactly, or if it was the callback being specified. So, there is a bit of like uncertainty, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, the core issue is that effectively, because it skips that step by just going to the inode, because it skips that, something's missing there, so you're able to free kind of its parent effectively. Yeah. Or get its parent destroyed. Like, that core issue doesn't seem too bad to understand. There are some questions, like he does mention, I'm not really sure what the best fix for the actual bug would be, and I mean, he does mention the straightforward, just walk the tree for the lookup, but at the same time, that's going to be a significant performance hit. Like, there's probably a reason why they don't walk the tree. But it's not so much a question of how to fix it, just this might be a significant performance hit.
That's what makes like kernel programming so difficult, is you're constantly doing this battle in your head between, can I do it this way that I know is secure, or do I do it in a way that I'm not 100% sure is secure, but I know it's performant? Like, when you're dealing with kernel, you have so many like internal struggles with those kinds of questions, and doing something as simple as like, okay, I don't need to walk the full list, I can just directly get it, it'll be fine. It's so easy to make those kinds of assumptions incorrectly, and you end up getting screwed for it.
The question you need to ask yourself is, what would Linus say?
What would Linus say? That we all need a little bobblehead Linus on the desk that has AI programmed into it, and it just curses at you all day every time you write code, tells you what you did wrong, tells you how to fix it, and you just that's how we become great programmers, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. I learned when I was helping out with the Mira kernel rootkit for the PS4 stuff. It's so hard to write good kernel code. So I don't even like feel like some kernel bugs, like the next one we're gonna get into, are egregious. I don't think they're really forgivable, but I am generally a lot more forgiving with kernel bugs because they're so easy to make, and they can be tough to fix. like this one is, because you don't want to just kill performance outright, depending on how many things are using that path.
And to be fair, I don't know how much of a performance hit that would be. I'm just making the assumption that like the lookup itself is going to be a fair performance hit. I just don't know how performant that path needs to be. And that's something that was mentioned by the author too, but I don't know whether people care about the performance of this path.
Yeah, you need to do some digging on that. So, unlike that kernel issue, this kernel issue is stupid trivial to understand because they even advertise it as trivial in the title, and it's well advertised.
So I wanted to cover this because, GR security is fairly well known, but they've also made a very significant mistake here.
Really? Okay.
So the title of this is Huawei HKSP introduces trivially exploitable vulnerability. And HKSP is Huawei Kernel Self Protection. The problem is, this isn't from Huawei. This is just some random guy who emailed the kernel hardening mailing list. Like the first line of, I'm just going to pull it up here. First line of the patches that he submitted, there's a readme along within the repo. This project have done and ignore all the bad grammar. I'm reading it as written. This project have done my research in spare time. The name of HKSP was given by myself. It's not related to Huawei company. There is no Huawei product. Use these code. So GR Security is calling out Huawei here, and it has nothing to do with them. Except for the title. So do you want to get into the issue, though?
Yeah, I was just reading the top paragraph there because a sentence caught my eye while you were saying that. It was the let me tab into it. Just saying, it is not clear if the posted patch set is an official Huawei release or whether the code is already shipped on any Huawei devices. But the patch set uses Huawei in its name. So just because it has it in its name is why they attached it to Huawei. Okay, that seems kind of silly. Anyway, yeah, the issue is really simple. They have a write handler, and when you're writing data, you're going to be copying data from userland into a kernel buffer. That kernel buffer happens to be a stack buffer of 32 bytes, and they take a user provided length and they don't do any checks on it. They just pass it right to copy from user. So it's just a straight up Stack Overflow. Awesome.
Yeah, so it's an interesting case though, because obviously this person does have some understanding of some kernel exploits, how some of that happens. Because they did at least make an attempt. Let me pull the GitHub back up. They do actually make an attempt here at introducing some particular self-protections. They mentioned the cred guard, namespace guard. Like, they talk about a number of issues here that are, legitimate things to try and protect against. So it's somebody that has some issue and yet still makes those completely basic mistakes. And I don't know, I guess it's a little bit weird. That said, I was going to say I don't see where they have Huawei as their organization, but I'm pretty sure that's literally just I think that's a user provided value. I don't think they're part of a GitHub. I don't think Huawei would even have a GitHub organization, but
actual organizations would have a little icon underneath that you could click on that would take you to the organization account. So yeah, it's definitely not an official Huawei group.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I didn't think it was, but I also didn't notice that line mentioned that they use it in their name, and the GitHub account has it as the organization. So I want to double check that. Yeah, as far as I can tell, this is basically unrelated to Huawei. But that's it. I want to pull out this isn't. I would put it this way: this person probably isn't an idiot. They wrote this fairly bad code. They do mention explicitly that's a demo code. But at the same time, This is a very stupid mistake from somebody that should know better.
This is one of those things you would see in a purposefully vulnerable Linux driver.
Yes.
Like, this looks like copy pasted code from one. So maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But yeah, it's very straightforward. That being said, this might not be straightforward to exploit if there's a stack cookie in that function. If there's a stack cookie there, you might not be able to actually get code execution from this. But actually, the bug itself is extremely obvious. So,
I mean, even if that's not, strictly speaking, exploitable right there, the odds are is that's not the only issue.
Yeah, that's another point. Yeah, and the irony as well of it being like a kernel self protection driver that has this kind of issue. Yeah, it's pretty funny. That being said, we'll move on to research. We'll move into vaccines. Everybody loves vaccines. So this is a post by Black Arrow, and it's called Ragnarok Stopper, Development of a Vaccine. So I must say I do love the idea of vaccines, or just messing with malware in general. This is kind of off topic, but I just kind of want to bring up a talk that I remember at DEF CON a few years ago. There was a talk I saw at DEF CON 26, I want to say, and it was talking about fuzzing for and exploiting vulnerabilities in malware to kill the malware. It was one of the most interesting talks that I can remember seeing. But basically the idea of vaccines is you find something that the malware checks that will shut itself down from running, like a VM check or something like that, and you abuse that to basically force the malware not to run.
Yeah, and I think actually there has been previous research into kind of creating more of a general purpose vaccine that would make your normal system look like it's a VM, so malware just wouldn't run on it. So it's not a new idea, but I don't think we've had the opportunity to actually talk about this idea of a malware vaccine before.
I don't think we have either.
On the podcast, so that's kind of why I want to bring this one up. In particular, I don't think this is terribly interesting. You understand the idea. As you mentioned, you're just trying to find some check that the malware does in order for it not to run, because ideally malware is trying to remain undetected. So part of that is when an analyst will open it and take a look at, you want to detect that and not do anything malicious during that period. So if it's an automated tool examining the malware, it's going to be like, okay, it doesn't do anything too worrying, so whatever, let's let it go. And that's kind of where a lot of these come down from. This vaccine in particular doesn't. This one in particular, it'll use a create event. It'll use the event to, and if you're not familiar, it's basically or at least as I understand it, effectively this global flag kind of thing you have between different programs, the create event in Windows. So it'll create a unique event. That way only one instance of the malware actually runs at a time. So you don't have the two instances running trying to encrypt the same files or something if it's ransomware. So in this case, though, if you just beat the malware to creating that event and make it think that it's already running, it'll just not run any further. It doesn't do any check besides checking if this event object has already been created.
Yeah, kind of reminds me of one I saw before. I can't remember the exact malware. I want to say it was maybe Mirai or something like that. But there was one where they just took a mutex or whatever, like a global lock, and the vaccine literally just took that lock first, and then none of the actual malware instances could ever take the lock, and they would never run. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same idea here. They're using that fingerprint and they're abusing it against the malware itself. So, what are your opinions on malware vaccines, Z? Because I'm curious.
I think it's a fun idea. At the same time, as soon as it becomes widespread, they'll just be less effective.
I was hoping we'd have different views. I have the exact same view. I think it's neat. They're cool to explore, but I don't think they're really practical. I think
they'll work for now.
I think by the time someone reverses it well enough to create a vaccine, and it's not going to be affected by a generic vaccine, Like there's going to be a lot of people already hit by it anyway. It's just kind of, it seems
sure,
like
but you can prevent a lot of people from being hit. But that said, if every malware needs its own vaccine or something, that's also just going to add up to a lot of extra resources being used on a machine.
It's exactly like real life, actually. Like, I remember hearing, with the common cold, you could create a vaccine for it, but there's so many different strains of it that it's just not worth the resources. And I think that can kind of be applied to malware as well. There's so many different kinds of malware out there, and different like modifications of previous malware. It's like it's going to be hard to get a generic catch-all vaccine. If you can, that'd be really cool. But if you have to target a vaccine for every single one of them, you're just going to be playing a losing game. It's just a sucker's bet.
Yeah,
trying to do something like that.
I'd agree with that.
But it is fun. It's fun to think about. Like I was saying, like I really enjoyed that talk last year about exploiting bugs and malware to like DOS it. Basically, I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just you do it because you can.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's pretty much all my thoughts on vaccines. But it is, I do like talking about it. It's fun.
Yeah, like I have no hate for them. It's just, in the long term, I don't think it's the route to go.
Yeah. All right, so we'll move into Rust. So we all know about Rust and how much safer it makes your programs automatically. Rust programs are basically unhackable.
Yes, I completely agree. No, obviously that isn't true. You can still introduce bugs in Rust, and that's kind of what I thought was interesting about this paper. It's nothing earth-shattering. Of course, you can still introduce bugs into Rust. There's still the unsafe sections of code too, and all of that. It's just a real-world study of some Rust programs and inspection of, in this case, 70 Rust memory safety issues, like actual issues that were discovered in real-world software, and 100 concurrency bugs. I mostly care about those memory safety ones. They have some insights, some suggestions, and they put out like a bug detector. But I just thought it was...
They have 2 bug detectors.
Yeah,
but
2 bug
I couldn't
detectors.
really find much information about either of them. They were a little bit vague on them, I found.
Yeah, I
was missing stuff.
I didn't dig into it. What I kind of found interesting here with this paper was just to look at how memory safety issues are being introduced into Rust applications. Because like I said, like there is kind of an understanding that Rust is generally like a fairly safe language to use, tries to have some compile time guarantees there. Even though it's a native language, it tries to kind of keep some performance with the zero-cost abstractions and still have security, and it, is concerned about memory safety. It's not just giving you, all the foot guns you could want.
I like that term, foot guns.
Well, it's... What else are you going to use them for?
Yeah, no, I agree with the term. I just, I like it.
Yeah, so I'll mention here on a few of the... Unless you want to give more of an overview, I'll jump right into some of the issues.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I'm just trying to find kind of the pages here. Basically what they found there, like I said, they cover a few different things, but they had 21 buffer overflows. And the errors tended to happen in 17 of them, so in most of them, 17 of the 21. The errors would happen when they would compute the buffer size or index in safe code, but then the out of bounds would happen later in unsafe code. And generally speaking, a lot of these are just kind of talking about how either the issue started in unsafe and ended up impacting safe code, or started in safe code and impacted unsafe. Nothing was like completely safe code all around. Sorry, my mic dropped there. Nothing was nothing was safe code all around. Like they didn't find any issues that didn't involve some unsafe code at some point. So as I mentioned, the buffer overflows tended to happen where you would compute that buffer size in safe code, use it later, and go out of bounds. Some error would happen when doing that computation in safe code. But they also had like uninitialized memory. Again, this is unsafe linked to safe code this time, where they would use the unsafe code to create some uninitialized buffer and then read it or use it in their safe code. They had a few invalid frees, 5 out of 10 of them. kind of shared the pattern where they would, and this was actually one of the interesting ones because this is kind of a pattern you might see in something like C++ or C, but in Rust it's particularly exploitable, or at least it's a particular issue. If you're watching, on the left-hand side of the screen, there's this unsafe function, fdopen. And what goes on there is you've got an allocation size of whatever the file object is mutable file. And then you assign a new file to it with the buffer and the vector in there. You're assigning that file to it. What ends up happening there, and this is the common pattern that they found for invalid freeze, where you would allocate this, in this case, the variable f, the right size. And when you assign that new file structure to f, that ends the lifetime of the old one, resulting in that old previous structure getting free, despite the fact there's still uninitialized memory within it. And that is the buff vector inside of that file struct. So it's an invalid free, unique to Rust. So I found that a little bit interesting. That said, I'm not, like, your exploitation scenario for that is going to have to be getting something inside of that memory that's getting freed. So it's I don't immediately,
that might not be too easy to do.
I don't immediately see the exploitation of that, but it is a memory safety issue that's unique to Rust.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, and so they also talk kind of use after freeze, which generally would
favorite
happen just a lot. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say favorite bug type.
But yeah, it would generally happen just an object would be dropped implicitly somewhere in safe code, but the pointer to the object, or a field if the object exists, and is dereferenced inside of unsafe code. And then they also had double freeze, two of them being from safe to unsafe, but most of them were some unsafe memory operation to create two owners of the value. When the lifetime ends, their values are dropped twice. Like I said, there's nothing here that's terribly unexpected. You can introduce vulnerabilities. That's not an earth-shattering idea here, but it is still interesting to see it actually laid out. Like, here are actual programs that are actually doing this. It does kind of give you a starting point if you were to be doing an assessment on Rust code, what type of issues you should be taking a look for, or what type of issues you should be looking out for. Which is where I think the benefit of this paper comes from.
It does kind of seem like the guys who wrote these papers were just getting bombarded by Rustaceans, and they just got pissed off, and they were like, "We're just going to drop this paper showing how wrong all of you are." Like, it seems almost spiteful in a way.
Yeah, perhaps. Like I said, I'm not going to speculate on motivation there, but I did find it just an interesting read, just because, I mean, it's not something that's been talked about a lot. I mean, it's just kind of, Rust is generally safe. Sure, people make mistakes, but whatever. Whereas this is, a proper look at it. So I appreciate that. They also talk about some null pointer dereferences, but I didn't even care to really go into the details on that because, of course, null pointer generally just isn't exploitable.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I will point out that I like about this paper is they look at applications that are real world applications, because some of the papers we've looked at in the past, they looked at like hobby projects or like small little things that nobody really uses. But some of the projects they looked at in here, like they looked at Ethereum, they looked at Redux, they looked at Servo. Like 3 out of the 5 things in that list I have heard of, and they're pretty popular projects. So I kind of like that they went after big fish, I guess, instead of like a lot of the papers.
Yeah, well, they went after real stuff.
Yeah, they went after real projects, exactly.
That said, Team K9 in chat does remind me of one thing. And I will mention that with some of these bugs I mentioned, unsafe code and safe code, they do talk about a little bit about having, like, some of these do come out of unsafe code that's internal to some other library. It's not just like exposed unsafe. So, like, the libraries that actually have some of these issues may be only using safe code, but the issues are introduced kind of elsewhere. So I just figured that was worth pointing out. The comment there was that he found a real Rust UAF. It was set as silent warning instead of hard error, but they fixed that about a year ago. 100% Rust code, no unsafe. So that's kind of where I want to make the mention there. Is in this case, like a lot of them talk about where the unsafe is, but the unsafe part of it wasn't necessarily exposed to the end user. And they kind of have that as one of their insights, though, is interior unsafe as being a good way to encapsulate the unsafe stuff. So that is having like a function, instead of just exporting it as unsafe, having it as like an internal only usage so people can be using kind of the safe interface.
So on that note, I did kind of have a question on this before we move on to shoutouts. C.
Yep.
What are your thoughts generally around unsafe? Because when you talk to like people who really love Rust and people who really hate Rust, there's like a big controversy around unsafe. Some people think it's really dumb that it's even supported. Some people think that the common thing I've seen around it is it allows you to do stuff that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do, and it at least marks that, hey, this is like a big red flag, there could be something bad here. Like if you're running into issues, it's probably in this area since it's marked as unsafe. You fall like in that latter category?
Yeah, I definitely fall into the category that thinks that's good to mark those unsafe areas. I think that's definitely a positive improvement, because when it comes to doing a code review, if you have to check all the code, like you can do a code review over absolutely every line of code. And in fact, like that should be done also. But having things marked as unsafe gives you an idea of where to focus your time, where somebody who cares about security should be looking at. So when you see that unsafe, it's like, okay, I have to take special care here to make sure this doesn't have any side effects that are going to be abused later. Whereas if you don't have it marked as unsafe, everything is fair game.
Yeah. I mean, the common argument I see against unsafe in Rust is that it's kind of antithetical to what Rust is trying to accomplish. But I mean, I kind of edge
needs
towards...
to be. You can't... As a language, it's trying to be able to work in like that system area, and sometimes you need to be able to break into unsafe code. That's actually one of the insights that they make in this paper. Insight number 1 is most unsafe usages are for good or unavoidable reasons. They mentioned that indicates that Rust rule checks are sometimes too strict, and that's useful to provide an alternative way to escape those checks. But still, at the core point there is a lot of the unsafe usage does have a purpose. And either Rust needs to stop checking that, which would weaken overall security, or keep the strict security, but allow people to say, hey, I know what I'm doing. Now I'm going to do that, and anybody else can come along and see, hey, they think they know what they're doing, let's prove them wrong.
Yeah, kind of like I want to take the the flotation device off. I can swim, you know what I mean? And I kind of edge towards that too. Like, it's very useful to be able to narrow down your focus on trying to nail down a bug, and have that functionality available to you than just not have it at all. So yeah, I edge towards the same way. But I was curious if you had like if you were one of the anti-unsafe people.
No, I thought when you were going to bring up unsafe, I thought you were going to talk about the unsafe propagation. Which is like whether or not you should have, if you use any unsafe code, should all the code that uses that unsafe be considered unsafe? So that's kind of what I was talking about before.
That's getting into Inception levels. I don't know if I could go that big brain.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a debate that's out there, though. I mean, we definitely don't need to discuss it. I imagine we probably both just agree that it would make little sense to actually have that unsafe propagate.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't.
Just everything would be unsafe, because eventually at like the really low level, it is necessary.
Yeah, the question is, when do you stop considering it unsafe?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like... Yeah, well, it would just end up like if everything would become unsafe because like it used a vector or something. I don't know if vector actually uses unsafe anywhere in it, but...
So I know you have a few shoutouts. I don't really have any shoutouts, so this is going to be kind of your solo section of the show. But yeah, I know you have some shoutouts, and one of them is actually the other ZDI post that wasn't posted today.
Yeah,
unless
one
you
of
have any
them.
other
Well,
final
so
thoughts
that's
on
one
this.
of them. There's the three there. One's the ZDI post. We'll have the description, or yeah, we'll have the description in the link. We'll have the link in the description. The other ZDI post, I mean, it's there. We just thought that the Windows one was a little bit more interesting. One of the other posts, though, was from Rhino Security Labs, an introduction to Google Cloud Platform privilege escalation. And it's just that. It's actually a part of a two-parter that just talks about some different privilege escalation techniques. I didn't think it was worth kind of covering on the show because it's not like a new exploit. But if that's an area, it seems like a pretty good resource. And the last thing as a shout out is from Maddie Stone and John Hopkins University. Beat the Machine workshop. It seems like this is something that she worked on a few years ago. If you're not familiar with Maddie Stone, part of Project Zero. We've covered her write-up before, and I know we've covered one presentation by her. Or maybe the presentation was attached. So either way, we've talked about some of her work before.
Yeah, for sure.
And so what she has here is it's an introduction to reverse engineering, and I thought it was an interesting approach. So I'm actually going to spend a little bit more time talking about this shout out, but it's focused, it's fairly beginner. It's something you could probably do in a couple hours or less. It depends on what if you're experienced with this, you'll do it in like minutes. But its target audience is from middle school to college students who have, some programming exposure, some familiarity with binary or hexadecimal, but like not much more than that. As an introduction to reverse engineering. And it's just a few problems. I've got a picture of one where you essentially go from, they show you the binary, white boxes and black boxes for for zeros and ones. And then you decode that binary into the instruction, into the ops, into the actual disassembly.
Insanity.
Well, so it's a very basic language or instruction set. Let me go back. And to be clear, that's the difficult one. The easier ones provide more information, like you don't have to do the binary translation, but just provides this really simple, fortunately I don't have a picture of it, very simple instruction set. So you kind of get that process of going through that process of kind of doing that translation to understand how that works. And yeah, I thought it was just an interesting approach on that. Again, something you could probably do. I want to say there's 4 or 5 exercises on there, so there's not a lot to it. There is a presentation that goes along with it also, like slides are available. But I did think it was an interesting approach because one, I mean, you could do it on paper, and it doesn't actually require you to have a computer in front of you. It is something you can do. It's easy enough that you could explain kind of how to do it to kids, although it sounds like Spectre thinks that's just insanity.
Well, I was just looking at it. Well, honestly, to be honest, I didn't realize it was a custom instruction set. I thought they were trying to get you to decode x86 instructions by the bits. I'm like, what, dude?
No, it's a lot simpler. It's more like a RISC system, if I recall, too, where it's static or it's fixed size instructions and all of that.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Like, if I recall, it's like move is like a 4 bits somewhere in here, 0 nibble. And then like 4 bits, basically just adding up to the different registers. And 4 bits on the other one for the same thing. So it's pretty easy to actually kind of figure out. And like I said, the easier version of it, there's easy, medium, and difficult. The screenshot I've got is from the difficult one. The easier ones are the exact same problems. The only difference is that they include more information in there, so that you might get a little bit more of the binary or something. But otherwise, they're the same challenges, so don't think you're going to work through the easy and then the medium. Just for most of our listeners, I'd say probably just, if you're actually interested with that, start off with the difficult one. But I mean, it's definitely approachable. Like, if you have a little bit of programming experience, like you kind of understand what assembly is, at least. Like, you don't need to know assembly, but you kind of understand like it exists, this is reasonably approachable to you. Like, and it's similar to what you do with actual reverse engineering. Later exercises have you kind of figuring out what the code is doing and decrypting this little cipher. I just think it's a really interesting approach to it. Because I was trying to find a little while back, I was going to be doing a presentation at my cousin's, or to one of my cousin's classes, some middle schoolers, about exploit development, and I was trying to find like some way to introduce that without getting too technical. This wouldn't fit that, but I did find it interesting. Like, this would definitely be approachable by middle school students.
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't seen like an approach like this like used anywhere else, so it seems to be novel, and yeah, it looks interesting. Definitely worth a shout out.
Yeah, and that's my last shout out.
That's your last one? Unfortunately, you beat me on the shoutouts. I don't have any, so 3 to Z, 0 to Spectre, I guess, in the shoutout department. That being said, we will wrap up the show, though, because I'm probably going to have to go to bed soon. I'm running on like 30 hours now.
Do you have a time for when the toolchain is actually dropping, or just later?
Later. Sometime before 11:59 p.m. Eastern, I guess. I don't know.
You don't even know that, but I'm going to hold you to it.
Okay, yeah. We'll try to get it out before then. We just want to make sure that that something in Mir is done for that. Back any info in your the YouTube channel. So actually, I am going to be uploading some stuff on that YouTube channel for the toolchain. I've made some tutorials on how to get like used to it. So I will be putting out those videos actually probably today. So that's funny that you asked that, because I haven't uploaded to that channel in like a year or two. So I'm going to be uploading to it tonight, and it's funny that you asked that. But yeah, just wanted to answer that quickly at a chat. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up the show. You could follow us on Twitter, get involved in our Discord if you want to join the community. We do the podcast on Mondays. I will reiterate again that we are taking a break after let me pull up the calendar because I'm bad at remembering things, 25th of May. 25th of May, we're going on break till September 14th.
That sounds right.
Yep, sounds right. And but we might be doing streams in between that, but we're not going to have any scheduled streams or anything like that. But yeah, other than that break, we will be back again next Monday and the Monday after, same time, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. You guys in?